If you're looking to increase the performance of your Jeep JK Wrangler, today we're going to be installing a set of these Accel Supercoil coil packs onto our 2012 Jeep Wrangler. These coil packs are constructed of a high dielectric strength material, and the housings are filled with a high temperature epoxy to resist shock, vibration, and other chemicals. These are going to increase the ignition output of your JK Wrangler, and these fit all 2012 to 18 Jeep Wranglers. They're a direct performance bolt-on upgrade, and it's not going to mess with your ECU or any other electronics. With that being said, let's get them installed in our 2012 Jeep Wrangler. Tools you need for this installation: a 1/4-inch ratchet, small extension, 8mm deep socket, 10mm deep socket, flathead screwdriver, and a trim removal tool. As you can see, we've got our hood popped, and we've also got the engine bay cover off. We're going to start taking this intake plenum off because there are 3 coil packs on this driver's side that we can't get to. The other 3 are over here. They're pretty easy to get to. However, we're going to take this plenum off first. I'm going to start with these 3 top long bolts, take an 8mm socket. Don't pull them all the way out, just get them out like that and leave them in that hole. There's a second one here in the center, and a third one right back here. Now we're going to move on to these 2 rear bolts. They're going to take a 10mm socket. Now we're going to remove these 2 vent hoses right here. Now I have a supercharged Jeep, so this would simply pull off if you have a standard 3.6 liter, and also this is going to pull off as well. I'm going to use a flathead to get this hose clamp. However, if you have a stock Jeep, just pull it off. On the passenger side, there are 2 heater lines here. You're going to pull off the 2 10mm bolts that hold them down. Pull it out of the way, and then so we don't lose any nuts, let's just put them back onto the studs just a little bit. We're going to pop these hoses out here. They're going to be your breather lines, and they'll just simply pop right out. One in the front, one in the back. Then we'll have access to 2 10mm screws that hold on this bracket for this harness and also onto that heater core. Can't really see it right now, but we'll get to them. Pull those off. Remove these 2 screws. While we're over here, we're going to remove also these 3 8mm bolts. There's 1, 2, 3 on this side, and then there's 1 in the far back. We'll get these 3 pulled off first. Now don't fully remove these, just like those top bolts, just leave them in. And they'll just rest there. The next step is going to be to remove your intake tube to your throttle body and your plenum here. Now, since we have an aftermarket intake, because it's supercharged, it's going to be a little bit different. However, you still have the same hose clamp right here. You can get that pulled off with an 8mm socket or the flathead screwdriver. Just loosen it up, and we're going to pull it off of that throttle body. Pull it off. A little squeeze there. As you can see, it pulled right off. What we're going to do is disconnect the connection down here for the throttle body. That way we don't pull any wires when we remove this plenum. Unplug your throttle body wiring harness right here by pulling out on this red tab, then pushing it in, pulling it out towards the right side. It'll pop right off. Then we're going to unplug the map sensor and get that pulled off of the plenum. Pull your map sensor plug off by depressing on the back of it. Then we're going to use a trim removal tool to get this post out as well as this. Get those pulled off that plenum. Just like that. It's all popped off. Now we can gain access to these 2 bolts right here. With that harness moved and out of the way, you have access to these 10mm nuts on the front here. Let's get those pulled off as well. So now to get the plenum off, what I'm going to do is actually pull it towards the passenger side to get those studs out of the brackets we just removed. Let's give it a go. It takes a little bit of jostling around to get it to pull out and make sure that nothing's hanging up. Make sure that you cover up your intake ports. You don't want any debris falling in there when you're working on your engine. I like to use a little bit of masking tape and just set it on there. Make sure before you start swapping out coil packs that your battery has been disconnected. You can do this before the install to make it a little bit easier. However, just make sure that it's disconnected before you start messing with the coil packs. After that long removal process, we now have access to these 3 coil packs on the driver's side. We're going to use a 10mm socket to get this bolt removed on the bottom here. It's going to be the same process for all 6 of them. So now what you do is just loosen it up, and you'll feel it'll actually stop it in there. And unclip this by depressing it here. Just pull right off. And they do pop on there pretty tight, so you're going to have to pull on them just a little bit. Just like that, they'll pull right off. And since you have gone this far to remove all the coil packs, it's a really good time to check your spark plugs. What you do is just get a socket in there, make sure it's a spark plug socket. Just loosen them up, get them pulled out and see how they look. We do carry all the spark plugs for your 07 to 11 JK, as well as your 12 and newer, both engine types. Now that you've got one removed, repeat the exact same process on the other 5. Just remove that 10mm bolt and disconnect the wiring harness, and they'll pull right out. Now you're going to grab your new Accel coil pack and slide it back into place. Make sure it's firmly on there. And you're going to get this hardware tightened up. Use a 10mm socket to get it tightened up. Reinstall your connection plug right here. You'll hear a little click. And repeat the same process for the rest of the other 5. Now that all of the coil packs are installed, I'm going to show you how to reinstall your intake plenum that you pulled off earlier. Remove the tape. Make sure that all the gaskets are in place. Now be very careful not to get any debris in there. Let's get this intake set into place. It's a little bit tricky to do, honestly. It takes a lot of coercing and convincing to get it back into where it was. Once it's in there, we can go around and get all the bolts tightened up as well as all the electrical connections made. Reconnect your throttle position sensor and make sure that red tab is pushed in. Slide your intake tube back onto the throttle body. Tighten up this hose clamp on the intake tube. Reconnect the map plug sensor. You'll hear a little clip. Then we're going to push back in these push pins that we pulled off earlier. Reinstall these front 2 10mm bolts onto this assembly here. Then get them tightened down with a 10mm socket. Reconnect both of these vent tubes. We'll get them tightened down. We're going to tighten down these 3 long bolts up top with an 8mm socket. There's 2 more nuts that need to go into these rear studs that you took off. You should get those both tightened down and use a 10mm socket. Reinstall your engine cover brackets onto the back end of the intake manifold here. Get both of them tightened down with a 10mm socket. Tighten the 2 nuts on the heater core bracket. There are 4 screws on this left side of this intake plenum. You have to get them tightened down with an 8mm socket. There's one way in the back. Let's get them tightened on. We got 2 more right here on the harness. There's going to be a bracket underneath this main wire harness that attaches with 2 screws onto the intake plenum. Let's get those tightened on now. Once everything has been reinstalled, we're going to reattach our negative side battery cable to our battery, ensuring that all the connections are made properly. That should be the end of your install. That wraps up the installation of these Accel coil packs onto this 2012 Jeep Wrangler. These are going to fit all 12 through 18 JKs equipped with a 3.6 liter engine. If you have a blown coil pack or are looking for some more performance, this is a great modification to make, and it only takes about 2 hours time and some basic hand tools. You can find these coil packs as well as many other great parts for your JK right here at cjponyparts.com.